Hey guys, my name is Olga and I'm happy to see you here in this new video. And today we are gonna try and discuss Acne Nude palette from Huda Beauty. You're gonna see swatches, free makeup looks, the third one is currently on me, and of course you're gonna see wear test. And moreover, we are gonna compare, of course. But before we start, as a reminder, don't forget to put a thumbs up and of course consider subscribing if you haven't subscribed yet. And now let's start. First look, and today we are gonna try mainly matte eyeshadows because I wanna have slightly matte eye look, but probably I will try this glitter, but I'm not quite sure about that. And today we are gonna have mainly gray, maybe with a bit of pink story as a crease shade, most likely. Okay, maybe this one is gonna be our crease shade. I'm not quite sure. It is a mix of pink and gray, and I don't wanna have a smudged twin, kind of. So I wanna try these two at least, and probably this shade. And on the lid, no. In the inner corner, I wanna add this lovely shade. On the lower, or no, on the eyelid, I want to add this shade. And we are going to try these three. That's the plan at least. Maybe I will try this glitter, or maybe I will try this glitter. I'm not quite sure about that, at least yet. So let's start, and we are going to start from... probably from this shade. It's going to be our medium shade if we talk about Future Win. It's not dusty on this side. I'm not gonna have any eyeshadow primers. Here I will have, and I will use the one from NARS. So grabbing a little bit and starting from the outer corner. Beautiful shade, and of course eyeshadows are quite pigmented. So adding it and blending slightly out. Now I wanna add highlight as a crease shade, and let's take a look. Beautiful shade, looks lovely. And of course I'm blending everything out and blending two shades together right here. And let's probably add this shade, and I'm gonna use it for blending everything into skin. By the way, matte eyeshadows are not that dusty. I would say that even they are not dusty at all. So blending edges and blending everything into skin. Now on the lid I'm gonna add this shade, and it's gonna be our main shade. It's gray with a bit of something beige. Starting from the center and moving the shade closer to the inner corner and to the outer corner as well. Here I'm gonna use a transition shade as well. So that's why actually currently I'm applying the lightest shade. It's pigmented and it doesn't emphasize skin texture, because time to time dry matte eyeshadows, they easily may emphasize skin texture. In the inner corner I'm gonna add white shade, and as well I will add it slightly on the lower lid. Oh, it's definitely pigmented. And of course blending edges. switching the side, and I want to add this lovely light pink shade on the lower lid. It looks more like white. It's almost not visible that it has a little bit of pink. Okay, closer to the outer corner on the lower lid, I'm gonna add this shade. So it was our crease shade, and I'm gonna blend it as well right here. Now back to our future wing, and I'm gonna use gray shade for blending this line. So it's gonna be our transition shade, and I'm applying it right here and blending the edge. We shouldn't have any harsh lines. So blending, blending, and blending. And now it's time to add the darkest shade, this one. And I'm gonna start from the lash line, and I'm gonna blend the shade into the previous one. And starting, of course, from the darkest side, right here, and starting to blend near the lash line. Of course, gonna draw a kind of a base line and blending everything together. So we shouldn't have, again, any harsh lines. And of course, I'm gonna add this shade near the lash line. I'm kind of drawing a wing back to the previous shade, and I wanna blend the darkest shade into the previous one. So smudging the edge and blending everything together step by step. Yes, it takes time, but it's worth it. Adding the same dark shade near the lash line. So don't forget that we have a kind of a wing. I wish I could keep it as it is. I like fully matte looks, but we are testing the palette, so we should do as much as we can, and we should try as much as we can. So I'm gonna add this topper slightly over. Not that easy. Okay. Maybe I can try to use another brush, or... Oh, finally I have something on. I do want to add just a little bit, just a bit of sparkles right here. Wow! I mean, wow, little stars. The size of these glitters is not that big, and actually due to this it looks way too lovely. Gorgeous. I like it. I like it. Okay. And of course, I'm gonna draw an inner line here using the same eyeliner from Kiko Milano. Probably I will apply over darkest matte shade. I won't do it. It's enough. In the waterline, I'm gonna add the, again, eyeliner from Kiko Milano in shade 1. It's slightly silver, not really silver, it's more white. Final look and final thoughts. I'm impressed. I do like this palette, I do like the quality. I have tried almost all matte eyeshadows today. I haven't tried only 3, and really, the quality is amazing. It was way too easy to work with this palette. It was easy to blend the shade. They are creamy, they don't emphasize skin texture. And it's quite crucial because if you want to do fully matte eye look, it is important having creamy matte eyeshadows. Because if you apply something dry, oh, no. Such eyeshadows may easily emphasize skin texture and it wouldn't be that nice. Pigmentation is high, it's quite easy to layer, and it's quite easy to mix all shades together. I'm not a big fan of cold stories. I mean, called Eyeshadow Stories, but I do like it. If we talk about these two shades, which are pink, gray pink, in my case, they appear more purple because I have a warm undertone. If you have cold undertone, in your case, they would appear less visible and not that purple. Guess why? Color theory. So it's expected. I like it. I mean, I like it. I like this look. Yes, 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 yes. Next time, probably we are gonna try slightly neutral, not neutral, slightly brown story, and I wanna try these lovely shimmers as a part of one look, and it's gonna be our final look. Currently, yes. Currently, of course, yes. Now I'm gonna show you eye makeup closely, of course, and we are gonna see each other in the evening. Hey guys, I have my makeup on almost 13 hours and let's check it out. On this side I've used an eyeshadow primer from NARS and everything looks gorgeous. No creases, perfectly. On this side I haven't used anything and still not that bad. Looks lovely, like it. Today we are gonna try slightly golden and brown story, and as well I wanna try this shade. Most likely we are gonna try this as well, these two shades, but I'm not quite sure about this one at least. So let's start, and let's start from the transition shade this time. And it's gonna be this one. This guy I'm gonna use for blending everything into skin, and this guy is gonna be our darkest shade. So starting from the first glass, I would say it's neutral beige. And let's see, it's quite light actually, but still it's visible. Now it's not that neutral, it's slightly warm. Changing the brush, changing the shade, and I'm gonna use the lightest one for blending everything into skin. It is quite light, and actually it might be used in the inner corner, for instance, or you can mix it with any other shades. Now a bit of burgundy, and I will add the shade in the outer corner. I'm impressed by matte eyeshadows. They are not dusty, they are creamy, and it's so easy to work with these shades. And they are pigmented. So blending everything. Let's try some shimmers, and I'm gonna start from this one and gonna add it closer to the outer corner. It's creamy. So let's take a look. Beautiful. Do I want to add a bit of golden, or I do? So we are gonna add right now a bit of golden closer to the inner corner. Beautiful shade. Beautiful. Awesome. Changing the side, and I'm gonna add a little bit of this shade. We should try it. Ooh. It looks beautiful, but you have to kind of smash some flakes because it may appear a little bit flakier. And of course adding a little bit above the crease. This shade is more like a topper, and it's required to put your brush and drag it. Now back to lower lid, and I'm gonna start from the darkest shade for today and gonna add it closer to the outer corner. Changing the brush, and now I wanna try this golden shade. I'm gonna add it on the lower lid most likely, because in the outer corner I think it might be a little bit too much, as this shade is quite bright. Too much shimmers. Okay, anyway. Let's try to add matte eyeshadow in the inner corner because way too much shimmers. So adding the lighter shade I've used today and applying it right here. Yes, it's far better than having one more shimmer in the inner corner. And as well, I want to draw a wing, a brown one, so I'm gonna use an eyeliner. In the waterline, I'm gonna add brown shade. I'm done with the look. Can't really say that I'm super happy with my false lashes today, but okay, anyway, we'll keep them as it is. So let me tell you what I've used on lips. By the way, yesterday I used a lip liner from Natasha Denona in shade Natasha and a lip gloss from Fenty Beauty in shade Lucy, if I'm not mistaken. Today I've used an liner from L'Oreal in shade 630. It's more peachy, so if you have cold undertone, it wouldn't really work. In your case, it would appear more orange. And I've applied in the center this lovely product from Elf, Lip Plumping Pen in red shade. I'm not quite sure about the name. And looks beautiful. Like it. Our lovely palette. Actually, I haven't tried only 3 shades from this palette, mainly silver shades, and we are gonna try them tomorrow as a part of our final look and discussion. So, what I'm gonna tell you, I'm happy with the quality and I do like this palette. We have tried today these 3 slightly brown or beige shades, and they are nice, but they are slightly warm. And actually you can combine them with some cold eyeshadows, and in this case you would have slightly neutral look, and I don't have any questions. From quality point of view it was, and it is way too easy to work with this palette. It's easy to blend the shades and they look lovely, and seems like lovely is my beloved word recently. Anyway, so yes, I do like them. The only thing that you have to be careful with these shimmers because they are way too creamy, and it's far better to apply them with fingers or using some sponges because it's not that easy time to time to apply them with brushes. I like it. Now I'm gonna show you make look closely, and we're gonna see each other in the evening. I have my makeup on around 9 hours, and now we are gonna check everything out. On this side I've used an eyeshadow primer, and on this side I haven't used anything. So let's see. Perfect. Well, yeah, some sparkles, they may fall off, especially while being applied. And here I'm impressed. Because this time these eyeshadows, they don't really crease. Time to time it may happen, and I would say that it's even expected. If we talk about super creamy formulas, they may, such eyeshadows, they may crease. Here, actually not bad. Time for a final review look, and only 3 shimmers are left. We have tried all matte eyeshadows and all other shimmers. We have only 1, 2, 3, these 3 shades, and I'm gonna draw. Today I'm gonna draw, and I'm gonna start from a wax base liner, and I'm gonna draw a base using this liner. This liner is from Catrice shade 40, and let's start. We are gonna start from the outer line, and I'm gonna start from a simple wing. And we are gonna use the darker shade from the palette for setting this liner. Wax-based eyeliners must be set with powder-based products, so with simple eyeshadow. For now, I only care about the base. And dragging my wings slightly out. And now I wanna do more or less the same thing in the inner corner. Starting from the line. And as well adding to the inner part a bit of more color. And dragging this line as well slightly out, probably like this. Time to blend. Blending only edges. Here as well. Time to set, and I'm gonna use the darker shade from the palette and starting from the inner corner. From the darkest parts and from the lines as well. Same thing for the outer corner, starting from the darkest shade and applying it over the liner. I want to try to add slightly gray story, so grabbing gray, brown, pink shade, and I'm gonna use it for blending the edge right here. Of course, I'm gonna apply it over brown, and still it should be fine. And blending the edge. One of the reasons is related to the shimmers I'm gonna apply. They are gonna be more silver, more gray. So I wanna have the same story. And same thing for the outer corner. I'm gonna use the lightest gray for blending again the edges right here. Time to shine, and we are gonna start from iced out. I'm gonna use a small brush because I want to add this shade closer to inner corner, and we are gonna combine this shade with this one, and it's not that easy to do it. Maybe I will have to add the shade, or okay, we'll do it step by step because I can't really apply it directly with my fingers, at least not now. And I'm adding a bit this shade slightly over matte eyeshadows. This shade doesn't have visible base, so it's better to apply it over something. Now, changing the side, or let's use another brush. We'll try to add this shade in the middle. For now, using a small brush, but if it's required, we'll apply with the finger. But for now, a bit with the brush. Combining these two shades and moving the silver one upper. And actually I have to use a big fluffy brush and gonna use the same shade because I wanna to add it slightly upper here. Right here. I'm gonna add a little bit more in the middle with my finger. Lower lid time, and I'm gonna start from the eyeliner and gonna add it to the outer corner. And of course I'm gonna have an inner line here, but actually I wanna add a little bit more black, and I will use black eyeliner right here quite soon. Blending the edge back to the darker shade from the palette. and again setting the liner, the pencil, using this shade. Closer to the inner corner, I'm gonna add gray silver metallic, and as well adding it near the pupil. And for now, kind of drawing an inner line, quite thick inner line. I'm gonna use the same darker shade from the palette for setting it. Back to the gray shade, dark gray. I'm gonna add it as a transition shade between the brown one and the silver right here. Now I wanna add a bit of black, and I'm gonna use an eyeliner from Inglot, shade 77. And I'm gonna add this black near the lines, and I will blend it into the darkest shade from the palette. So by doing this, I'm adding kind of a bit more definition and blending. Near the lash line, adding the same liner. In the waterline, I'm gonna add silver shade from Eveline, number 12. I'm quite happy with the final look, and we have tried today 3 new shades, and they are nice. At least they look wonderful on eyelids, but 2 of them are quite flaky, and you have to be careful while applying them. And if you talk about shimmers from this palette, we have 7, and 4 out of 7 are quite flaky, so bear in mind. Now I'm gonna finish my makeup look, and I'm gonna use this look for filming the review actually. So right now I'm gonna finish everything, gonna show you eye makeup look closely. We are gonna see each other in the evening, and we are gonna discuss everything. I have my makeup on almost 9 hours, and now we are gonna check everything out. On this side I've used an eyeshadow primer, and it looks fine. On this side I haven't used anything, and yeah, eyeshadows may crease, and actually it is expected because they are way too creamy. And in my case it is expected because I have deep eyes, so it's okay, it's fine. Some shimmers here and here, but guys, they didn't fall off. Actually, it happened while I was applying eyeshadow, so it's okay. Now it's time to discuss everything, and of course I'm gonna start from the products I'm wearing currently on lips. As a lip liner, product from Colourpop in shade Ash Tone, lipstick from Yves Rocher in shade 102, and as well I've added a little bit of a lip gloss from Azam in shade Golden Star. And I like this combo, all these products work nicely together. Back to the palette. And we are gonna start from basic information. This palette costs €72, and of course it's possible to find it on sales. And don't forget that it's gonna be on sales quite soon, as Black Friday is coming actually. We have 16.1 grams here, and I can't really say that it's a lot, and at the same time I can't really say that it's not enough. Because if we compare this palette to the previous one, Rose Quartz, we had 70.35, Empowered, we had 16.8. So I would say it's kind of average. It's made in Italy, as usual. If we talk about all Huda Beauty's palettes, which are big, they are made in Italy. All small palettes are made in China. And I know that some people still don't know that this palette is the last one from Huda Beauty. At least it's written on her official IG account. And yeah, it's confirmed. Currently it's confirmed. No one knows what will happen in the future, but for now this palette is the last one, unfortunately, because if we talk about big palettes, I'm a big fan of them, and it's a little bit pity because I think that big palettes from Huda Beauty, they are nice and they worth their money, and of course you can always buy them on sales. Quality part, and I almost don't have any questions from this point of view. But there are some shades which are slightly flaky and you have to be careful with them. Matte eyeshadows. It's easy to work with these matte eyeshadows. This formula is not new to Huda Beauty. Quality is stable. If we talk about matte eyeshadows here. If you have any palettes, big palettes from Huda Beauty, for instance, Grunge, Empowered, formula is exactly the same. Matte eyeshadows are creamy, it's easy to work with them, it's easy to blend them, they don't fade while wearing, and it's easy to mix the shades together and they work nicely together. They are not flaky, they are not dusty, it's easy to work and combine these shades with some shimmers, so no questions at all from quality point of view. With shimmers, everything is not that great and the quality is not that stable. We are gonna start from basic metallics and we have two shades in this formula. You can apply this formula with a brush or with fingers, depending on the look and depending on your preferences. This formula is not new to Huda Beauty. If you have this palette, Grunge palette, we have at least two shades in this formula. It is a beautiful basic formula, doesn't really emphasize texture, but if you apply a lot, of course, it may emphasize a little bit. This particular formula is not flaky and it doesn't fall off while being applied or while wearing. The next formula is gonna be, I would say, these two. I think that they are more or less the same, but at the same time, they are not exactly the same. If we talk about this particular shade, it has more visible base. This shade doesn't really have it, and I would say that it's more like a topper. But if you touch them simultaneously, you'd probably think that it is the more or less the same formula. At least I think so. It's possible to apply this formula with a brush, but yeah, you will have to spend a bit of time for finding a correct brush. But of course, at the same time, it's possible to apply this formula using fingers. And in this case, the result is going to be brighter. This formula, I think, is not new to Huda Beauty as well. And it reminds me slightly, probably the shade Pretty Grunge palette or Empowered. I would say both moves. Quite familiar shade. But with these two guys, you have to be careful because this formula might be a little bit flaky, especially if you apply these two shades with a brush. If you apply with a finger, probably might be a little bit better. This product doesn't fall off, but it may crease, depending on your anatomy and depending on your skin type, actually. And if we talk about the super creamy shimmery eyeshadows, it is expected. They should crease because they are way too creamy. And due to this, when you're blinking, product just simply moves. And that's it. And it's okay. It is expected. And while working with such formulas, you just simply have to apply some eyeshadows bases, or you can apply, for instance, liquid eyeshadows before applying such formulas. And in this case, everything should be fine and everything should stay in place till the end of the day. Moving on, this lovely formula. Two shades. We have two shades and it's so flaky. This formula, again, is not new to Huda Beauty, this lovely palette. And here we have one shade, which is called Rebel. And actually, it is exactly the same formula. Be careful with it. It looks beautiful. This formula is amazing. It's super creamy. It's super shimmery. It looks lovely on eyelid. It's possible to apply it using with a brush or using your fingers. So again, it's up to you to decide. But this formula is slightly flaky. So be careful while applying, especially this shade. It's slightly different if we compare this to this one. In my personal opinion, is slightly more flaky, I would say. And of course, it may crease a little bit. And no, dot. It doesn't fall off while wearing. Actually, it just simply might be. It may fall off while being applied, and that's it. And the last formula from this palette is this one. It just basic glitters. Dot. Nothing to add. And I'm gonna show you almost an exact dupe, and I would say that the product I'm gonna show you is slightly better from quality point of view, because I think that this glitter is a little bit big and a bit dry. And the product I'm gonna show you is gonna be more creamy, and I think it looks a little bit better. But still, a lovely formula, looks beautiful, and you can use it as a topper, as a basic topper. And I do like our first look, and this glitter worked perfectly for the first look. And now it's time to discuss the shades. Now we are gonna go through all shades, and we are gonna discuss all undertones. Comparison is gonna be a little bit later. We're gonna start from this line, and I'm gonna start from the lightest shade. Okay, it's white pink, light pink. It looks pink in the palette, but actually in real life on eyelid it appears more white, and actually this pink is not that visible actually. And if we compare these two shades, actually in my case they look more or less the same as a part of the first look. I think that I've used them. Yes, I used them in the first look. This shade, simple silver glitter, nothing to add. This shade, oh, it is perfect, it's beautiful. It appears as something gray, but it's not that gray. It is a mix of gray with a bit of pink and a bit of brown. I would say even beige. So beautiful, complicated shade, and it looks complicated on eyelid, and it works perfectly with this gray shade. And this gray shade is not really gray, and I like it because it's so complicated and so beautiful. The next one. This one. This one. Beautiful, slightly silver glitter with a bit of golden and a bit of purple. It looks beautiful, but yeah, don't forget that it's quite flaky. And if we talk about this silver shade, it's more on bronze side than on blue side, because silver may appear differently. It might be more colder or slightly warmer. Here we have slightly warmer shade. The next one is a matte one. It is a mix of pink with a bit of gray. So actually, in my case, it appeared more purple, especially actually this shade. This shade is more neutral. So here we have less gray pigment than here. This shade appears more purple, at least in my case. If you have gold undertone, it shouldn't be that purple in your case. I do like this shade. Again, it works way too great with this gray eyeshadow and with this slightly pink purple eyeshadow. Warm beige. So looks nicely and actually works nicely. I like it, and it is a bit of warmness in this gold story. I like it. It is a basic, I would say, slightly peach shade, which is more on orange side. Light beige, warm. It's more warm. Oh yeah, beautiful and complicated, quite complicated. It appears as something probably dark brown with a bit of purple, but actually it reminds me slightly blueberries, and looks lovely on eyelid. It is a mix of purple, a bit of pink, a bit of gray, and a bit of black. Lovely complicated shade, works perfectly with other shades as well. And yeah, this shade is the darkest one from the palette. I would say it's more on neutral side than on cold side, because sometimes you can find, and actually I'm gonna show you quite familiar shade from this palette, and here we have more colder, I would say, yeah, colder shade. Gray, beautiful. It's not a basic gray. It doesn't contain blue. It contains more pink, I would say, and it works perfectly with pink shades. And if you want to do gray smoky eyes, take this shade and apply it fully on the eyelid and use these two shades as transitions, and they are going to be perfect, and they would work together perfectly. And the shade is really, really beautiful. And by the way, it contains a bit of brown as well, but it's not that visible. It's cold, of course it's cold, but it's not blue, as it may happen time to time. Beautiful shimmer, and I would say it's more neutral. It has a little bit of golden, but it's a kind of a mix of golden with gray. Beautiful and complicated, and has a bit of something purple, or even what do we call it? Bordeaux or burgundy. A bit of burgundy. So it seems like it has a bit of this shade inside, and that's why these two, they work quite nicely together. Burgundy. And I would say it's more on cold side. It looks beautiful and interesting, has visible base, don't forget about it. Basic white, but it's not that blue, because white might be more blue or more warm or more neutral. I would say here we have something neutral and beautiful shade as well. Moving on, a mix of pink, a bit of purple, and blue. Beautiful shade, like it, doesn't have visible base, so bear in mind. Gorgeous shade, especially if you have gold undertone. A mix of pink, purple, and gray. It's perfect in case you have cold undertone. In case you have warm undertone, it would appear in your case more purple, as it was in my case. If you have cold undertone, it would appear more pink, and it would look really beautiful. Silver. And here we have a bit of blue, I would say. Silver gray with a bit of blue. But actually, I think that I've found a quite familiar shade in the other palette. This one, burgundy, kind of dark burgundy with a bit of brown, nothing to it. These three shades, by the way, they work quite nicely together. And the last shade from the palette, slightly golden with a bit of gray, so it's not super warm. I would say it's more neutral, despite the fact that it's golden. Something like this. Time to compare, and I'm gonna show you some familiar shades from the other palettes, and I'm gonna show you swatches side by side. I'm not gonna tell you something like this. These two palettes are way too familiar, you can buy one or the other one, because it's not true. And I've already seen that some people compared these two palettes, Natasha Denona, I Need a Nude palette, and this palette from Huda Beauty. Guys, they are not the same. They are not the same, come on. This palette is more on gray side, this palette is more on cold side, this palette is more on neutral side. And if you have cold undertone, this palette would work far better in your case. This palette is also quite nice, but it's more neutral. And here we have more shades with cold undertone, which are way too cold, especially if we talk about warm undertone. So these two palettes, they are not exactly the same. They are way too different, especially if we talk about undertones. I can show you one more quite familiar of a palette from Natasha Denona, but same thing, I don't think that they are the same. Here we have more gray and pink story. Here we have more gray and brown story. Different stories, and actually I haven't found any shades which are more or less similar to each other. Same thing here, actually. I've tried to compare them side by side, No, they are not the same. Different. They all shades have different undertones. And actually, I can show you something more or less familiar from Colorful. But again, it's not gonna be exactly the same. But here we have a bit more gray shade, especially if we compare this palette to Natasha Denona's palette. So actually, I can't really suggest you an exact dupe where you're gonna find gray pink story with a bit of burgundy. I can't really suggest. So that's why I've prepared quite many palettes, and actually I found quite many similar shades. And we are gonna start from Makeup by Mario palette. Here we have a beautiful light beige shade, and I think that it looks quite similar to this shade from Huda Beauty. They are not exactly the same, but actually in some cases they may appear more or less the same. If we talk about Huda Beauty, it has a bit more pink. Product from Makeup by Mario almost doesn't have any pink, and it's more warm and it's more yellow. The next palette is going to be from Natasha Denona. Surprise! I need a warm palette, not nude, warm palette. Here we have shade Mellow, and it reminds me a sec. Warm with a bit of peach and a bit of orange. Yeah? Sounds familiar to this shade. They are quite similar, but same thing. They are not exactly the same. Here we have a bit more pink. Yes, that's why I told you that this palette from Huda Beauty is more on gray and pink side. Despite the fact that I've shown you quite warm, slightly orange shade, it has a bit of pink. Actually, I forgot to tell you about it. Sorry. Anyway, now we are discussing it. So here we have more orange, here we have more pink. Moving to this white shade, and it reminds me white shade from Natasha Denona Xenon palette. Here we have beautiful white shade as well, but same thing, they look quite similar, but they are not exactly the same. Here I would say that we have a bit more blue, and this shade appears a bit more brighter and whiter if we compare them. Rose Quartz palette, and actually here we have 3 shades which look quite similar to the shades from this palette. We are gonna start from the darkest shade from this palette, and it looks quite similar to this shade, to this darkest shade from this palette. Are they the same? Not really. They have slightly different undertones, and I would say here we have a bit more gray and black. Here we have a little bit less. But actually, in some cases, in case of some people, these 2 shades may appear exactly the same. So here I would say that this particular shade, is almost, I would say, 95% the same as this one. Moving on, the next one is gonna be this shade. And it reminds me, it is a mix of pink with a bit of purple, with a bit of gray. Pink with a bit of purple, with a bit of gray. Time to compare Rose Quartz and they are not exactly the same. So they look quite similar, but they are not exactly the same. Here we have a bit more purple. It's the new version. It's the Rose Quartz. Rose Quartz is more on pink side, so it has more pink undertone. Here we have more purple and gray. So same thing, they are not exactly the same. This shade appears more gray, but I would say that it's more on pink side. And at some point, yes, at some point, it reminds me gray shade from this palette. But you know what? No, no. This shade is more pink. This shade is more gray. So it's visible. And here we have more even purple due to this. Here we have kind of a basic gray, but without blue. Empowered palette. And here I have 3 shades, which I would say look quite similar, but just a little bit. But anyway, I'm gonna show them to you. This dark burgundy with a bit of brown reminds me slightly the darker shade from Huda Beauty, from the new version, and this shade. It's called Faux Pure. Are they the same? Not really. Not really, guys. Here we have more red undertone, here we have more purple undertone. The next shade is gonna be this one. It is a mix of pink, gray, and purple. Lovely, beautiful shade. Not exactly the same. This shade is lighter, first of all. First of all, it's way too lighter. And again, here we have a bit of red, here we have more pink and purple. So same thing, they're not exactly the same. Of course, we can try to compare these gray shades. I haven't filmed swatches. Anyway, close swatches, but let me show them to you. They're not the same. Lighter, darker, a bit of red and purple, gray with a bit of pink, but not that purple as this shade. From Grunge palette, I wanted to show you shade Freedom, but actually it's not that similar to this light pink from the new palette. They have different undertones, and I would say that this shade is slightly darker than this one. And if we talk about matte eyeshadows, we are done more or less. So if you want to find some familiar shades, you should check out Huda Beauty's palette, but still we didn't have any exact matches. Probably only one shade from Rose Quartz, and it was the darkest shade. So it was the closest shade, and that's it. Talking about shimmers, here I have 2 dupes to show. First of all, Sephora Collection, a new shimmery shade 602, and it's perfect. It's glittery, it's creamy. Look at it. And this shade from Huda Beauty. And I think that Sephora is a bit better. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, these single eyeshadows are made in Italy as well as this palette from Huda. But I mean, guys, they are so familiar. But Huda Beauty is drier than Sephora. That's life, it happens. So if you're interested in this shade, take this product from Sephora Collection. You don't need, in this case, this palette. The next dupe is gonna be from Colourpop, and I think it's almost exact dupe. Let me remove it. I want to show you swatches right here. Colourpop shade Ice Dream, Huda Beauty Eyes Out. It is a dupe. It is a dupe, guys. Maybe Huda is slightly more purple, but just a little bit. Just a little bit. And I think that this shade from Colourpop is one of the best, but in most of the cases it's sold out, so bear in mind. And as well, I found quite familiar shades to this one because it's basic silver, and they're not gonna be exactly the same, but still. Huda Beauty, Lime Crime. Here we have slightly, I would say slightly gray silver shade. So they are not exactly the same. Here we have more blue, here we have less blue, and one more slightly metallic and silver shade from Natasha Denon, of course, Xenon palette. But same thing, not exactly the same. And it was the last shade. And now let's talk who needs this palette. If you have cold undertone fair skin, it's your perfect palette because it would work nicely in your case. Probably you're not gonna use these two shades, but still they are slightly, especially this shade is slightly pink, so you can combine it and it may appear even neutral in your case depending on your skin tone. If you're way too pale, yeah, these two shades may appear way too warm in your case. If you have neutral undertone, it should work nicely as well. If you like cold palettes, why not? If you have warm undertone, why not? Time to time we can easily play with such shades, but of course in your case, in case of warm undertone, you have to do a look. You can't really use this gray shade as a crease shade, and otherwise it may appear a little bit strange, and it may emphasize something bad. Let's say it this way. If you are new to makeup and if you want to play with a nice palette, and I think that this palette is a nice one because it's easy. It's way too easy to work with this palette, and you can easily do some nice looks. We have crease shades, we have dark shades, we have light shades, we have actually everything we need. If you want to draw in, we have 2 dark shades. It's perfect. If you want to do some basic looks, we have quite many crease shades, especially if you have cold undertone. Easy to work, easy to apply. And actually I started to test this palette after testing this collection from Rival and this lovely palette from Rival, and it was like a dream. It was like a dream working with this palette and doing some nice looks because the shades are so creamy. They don't emphasize anything, especially if you talk matte eyeshadows. If we compare more high-end palettes to some cheap palettes, matte eyeshadows may easily emphasize texture because they are way too dry in most of the cases. Here, perfecto. It was way too easy to work with this palette. And yes, I like this palette and I think that it's worth it. And if you can catch it on sale, grab it. Beautiful palette, especially if you have cold undertone. In my case, of course, I'm not gonna use it daily because it's way too cold for me, but in some cases, why not? So let me know what you think about this palette from Huda Beauty. Do you like it or not? Are you gonna buy it or no? I hope you enjoyed this video and sorry that it was quite long, but I wanted to tell you as much as I can. If you like this video, please don't forget to put a thumbs up and of course consider subscribing. I wish you a pleasant day and I hope to see you soon in the next video. Bye bye!